Chapter 5. The History of Mankind as Told by Anastasia. Vedism. People have been living on the earth for billions of years. Everything on the earth was created perfect right from the start. Trees, blades of grass, bees, and the whole animal world. There is a direct connection between everything living on the earth and the entire universe. The apex of creation is man. And in the great pristine harmony of all things, man was created harmonious. Man's purpose is to learn about all his surroundings and create perfection in the universe, to create the likeness of the world of the earth in other galaxies, and with each new creation of his to add more splendor to earthly creations. The way will open for man to create on other planets when man is able to overcome temptation, when man is able to hold in unity the grand and diverse energies of the universe inherent in himself, and when he does not allow one of them to take precedence over the rest. The day when the whole earth is a paradise garden will mark the opening of the path of creation in the universe, and once man becomes aware of the whole harmony of the earth, he will be able to contribute his own splendor. Man takes it upon himself to take account of his actions once in every million years. Whenever he makes a mistake, whenever he allows one of the many diverse energies he contains to dominate at the expense of the rest, a global catastrophe takes place. Then everything starts again from the beginning. This has happened many times. One of mankind's million-year periods may be divided into 3 ages. First, the Vedic age. Second, the age of the image. And third, the age of the occult. The first age of human society on the earth, the Vedic, lasts 990,000 years. During this age, man lives in paradise like a gladsome child, maturing under parental care. During the Vedic age, God is known to man. All God's feelings are inherent in man, and through them man is able to obtain any advice he needs directly from God. And if man should suddenly make a mistake, God is free to correct it simply by giving a hint, without disturbing the general harmony or infringing on man's freedom in any way. In the Vedic age, man does not raise questions about how or by whom the world, the universe, the galaxies, along with his marvelous planet called Earth, were created. Everyone is completely aware that everything around, either visible or invisible, has been created by their Father, namely God. The Father is everywhere, all that grows and lives, all his living thoughts, his program, and one can use one's own thought to commune with the Father's thoughts, and one can contribute to his program provided one first understands it in detail. During the Vedic age, man did not bow down before God, nor was there the multitude of religions which sprang up afterward. There was a culture to life. People lived a divine way of life. There were no diseases in the flesh, feeding and clothing himself in a divine manner. Man simply did not think about food and clothing. Thought was otherwise occupied with the excitement of discovery, and no rulers reigned over human society. There were no boundaries making off states as today. Human society on the earth consisted of happy families. The various continents were inhabited by families. They were all united by their aspiration to create a space of splendor. There were many new discoveries, and each family, upon making a splendid discovery, felt the need to share it with others. Families were formed by the energy of love, and everyone was fully aware that a new family would create one more oasis of splendor on their native planet. There were many rituals, holidays, and carnivals among the people of the Vedic age, which each imbued with great meaning, sensitivity, and a conscious awareness of the real divine existence on the earth. Each ritual served as a grand school and a grand examination, for each man took part in it. An examination of the eyes of others, in the eyes of oneself, and, consequently, in the eyes of God. I shall tell you about and show you one of these rituals. It was a wedding rite, or rather, the recognition of the union of 2 people in love. Look and see. Try to compare the level of knowledge and culture with that of today. A union of 2. a wedding. The wedding rite, a bonding of two hearts, took place with the participation of the whole village, sometimes several neighboring or even distant villages together. The lovers-to-be could meet in various ways. It could happen that two young people from the same settlement might fall in love. More frequently, this occurred at one of the major festivals where a number of villages got together. When two gazes met, and a spark of feeling was ignited in their hearts, it did not matter whether he approached her or the other way around. They could tell a lot about each other's feelings simply by looking into each other's eyes. But there were words too, which, when translated in today's language, might sound something like this. With you, my beautiful goddess, I could create a space of love to last forever, he would tell his intended. And if the girl's heart responded in kind, she might answer, my God, I am ready to help you in your grand co-creation. Next, the young lovers would jointly select a location for their future home. They would go together and visit the area around the settlement where he lived, and then visit a corresponding area near her village. And there was no need for the lovers to tell their parents of their plans. Everyone in both settlements knew what was going on and was fully aware of the grand happening that would soon take place. After mutually agreeing upon a site where they would make their future life together, the lovers would often retreat there, just the two of them. Sometimes they would spend the night there, under this open sky or in the shelter they had constructed from tree branches. They would greet the dawn and bid farewell to the day there. After returning briefly to their parents' houses, they would hurry back to their chosen site. It called them and drew them to itself, much as an infant inexplicably draws itself to a pair of loving parents. The parents did not ask the young lovers any questions. They simply waited in eager and joyful anticipation for their children to ask questions of them, all the while watching as their son or daughter spent time in deep meditation. And the children once more went off to their grand retreat. This might go on for months or even a year or two, and all during this time there would be no physical intimacy between the lovers. People in the Vedic settlements knew that these two lovers' hearts were creating a grand design, inspired by the energy of love. Right from birth, both he and she had been absorbing from their parents the lifestyle, knowledge, and mindfulness of their Vedic culture. They could share their deep knowledge, either of the stars burning in the night sky, or of the flowers unfolding their petals with the rising of the sun, or of the purpose of the bees, or the diverse energies existing in space. From early childhood, both he and she had been bearing witness to the marvelous domains, oases, and paradise gardens their parents had created in love, and now they were aspiring to co-create their own. On their chosen plot of land, a hectare or more in size, the lovers laid out a plan for their real life ahead. The task before them was to mentally formulate a design for their home and work out an arrangement for a wide variety of plant life, where everything could work in mutual support and harmony. Everything would be arranged to grow on its own without requiring any physical effort on man's part. There were a whole lot of factors to be taken into account here, including the disposition of the planets as well as the day-by-day flow of air currents. Come spring and summer, plants would exhale ethers and give off a delightful fragrance. The young lovers would try to arrange them so that whenever a breeze blew, a bouquet of many different ethers would waft into their dwelling. All this foreshadowed the birth of a grand and extraordinary complex. It consisted of divine creations. Besides, the place the lovers selected was to be transformed into a scene of splendor which would delight the eyes. Not on a canvas, but on living ground. A living design was being created in thought, one that would last forever. Even today, people can imagine how involved and concentrated thought can become when one is endeavoring to come up with a design for one's home. A Dachnik, too, will understand how, especially in the spring, one's thoughts can get absorbed in what one's plot of land will look like in the future. And a talented artist, in planning out a picture, also knows how he can get carried away by his thoughts. All these aspirations were now concentrated in two loving hearts. their knowledge was enhanced by the energy of love, fostering new inspiration. This is why they did not even think about what we call today the pleasures of the flesh. Once the design was complete in their thoughts, the lovers first paid their respects to the bridegroom's home village, where they went around to every house and invited the residents to come for a visit. Each household awaited their arrival with great excitement and anticipation. The people of the Vedic culture knew that when lovers came to see them, a new energy of divine love would visit their domain, albeit just for a moment. And the marvelous space of each domain would smile at the energy of young love. There was no question of imagination or occult beliefs here. After all, even today anyone finds the company of a good person more pleasant than that of an angry one. Lovers cannot be angry, especially when they come visiting as a couple. But in every family in the village there was also a feeling of anxiety. Whenever the young couple dropped in on a garden, a courtyard, or a house, they would say just a few words to the residents, just a sentence to each one, something like, "Oh, what a splendid apple tree you have," or "Your cat has a knowing look," or "Your bear is a real worker, very considerate." To any resident hearing the lovers praise a tree growing in the garden or the household cat, this was a sign of respect shown by the younger generation to their elders' way of life. The appraisal was always sincere, for the one giving it was indicating that he too would like to have a tree or a bear of similar worth. It was with great pride and joy in the face of the whole village that each resident aspired to present the young couple with the object of their praise as a gift. And all would wait with anticipation for the day the couple had selected, when they would present their gifts to the bride and groom. In the meantime, the couple would also go from house to house in the bride's village. Sometimes it took 3 days to visit every family in the 2 settlements, sometimes more than a week. When the couple finished making their rounds, and the selected day arrived, people both young and old would rise at dawn and begin hastening to the site of the young couple's new home for a visit. People would take up a position around the perimeter of the couple's selected domain, marked out by dry branches. In the middle, next to the shelter, a little mound rose out of the earth, decorated with flowers. Now, look now, and you will behold a most extraordinary scene. There he is, look! Here is a young man coming out to greet the residents of 2 villages. He is magnificent, a virtual Apollo, with hair of russet brown and eyes of bright blue. He ascends the mound. Now, on top of the mound, Radomir, that is his name, is excited. The eyes of all the people present are fixed on him alone, and in the ensuing silence he begins his speech. In front of everyone assembled, he sets forth the design of the new space of love which he has co-created with his beloved. With the aid of hand gestures, Radomir tells where the apple tree will grow, as well as the cherry tree and the pear tree. He shows the location of future groves of pine, oak, cedar, and alder, along with what berry bushes will grow in between, what grasses and herbs will send forth their pleasant fragrances, and how easy it will be for the bees to build their home among the trees, and where that workhorse of a bear will hibernate during the winter. He speaks quite quickly with great inspiration, setting forth the carefully thought-through design. He goes on speaking for about 3 hours, and the whole time the people listen with rapt attention. And each time the young man points to a spot where some living thing will grow according to his grand design, someone from the group of people listening will go over and stand on the future site of the apple tree, pear tree, or cherry tree. Sometimes this individual is a woman, sometimes a man or an elderly person, but it could also be a child with eyes full of awareness, wisdom, and joyful contentment. Those stepping forth from the assembly are already holding in their hands saplings of the tree or plant designated for the selected spots where beauty is to unfold. As each one steps forth, the people bow to him, inasmuch as he has shown himself worthy of the young couple's appreciation, as they did the rounds of the village domains, for being able to bring forth beauty, which means he has been found worthy of appreciation in the part of the Creator, the Father of all, the all-loving God. That is not a conclusion reached through superstition. It is quite logical. People of the Vedic culture were wont to treat the young couple designing the splendid oasis as deities. Such treatment was not unfounded. After all, the Creator had performed his creations in an impulse of inspiration and love, and these young lovers, likewise inspired by love, have now created a splendid design. Look, the young man has finished speaking. He comes down from the mound and goes over to where his bride is standing. She has been following the whole proceedings with great excitement and emotion. He grasps her hand and leads her to the mound, where they take up a position together, and the young man utters these words in front of everyone assembled. I have not created this space of love in isolation. Here is my marvelous inspiration standing beside me before you all. The girl, it would be better to refer to her as a maiden, initially lowers her eyes in the face of the whole gathering. Every woman has her own particular charm, but there come special moments in the life of every woman when she rises over everyone else. Such moments are not found in today's culture, but back then. Look, standing on the mound, Lyubomila, as she is called, has raised her eyes to greet the people around her. The cries of excitement of the whole crowd have merged into one. The girl's face has broken into a smile, a bold smile, not a saucy one. She is overflowing with the energy of love. Her cheeks glow more intensely than usual. The maiden's clear eyes and body, vibrant with health, reach out to envelop the people and the whole space around them with a radiant warmth. For a moment the whole scene falls silent. Still, the young goddess shines before the people in all her beauty. And so there is no question of haste as the maiden's parents, accompanied by the whole family, both young and old, solemnly make their way to the mound where the young couple are standing. They pause at the mound and bow to the couple. Then the maiden's mother asks her daughter, All the wisdom of our family lines lies in you, my daughter. Tell me, do you see the future of the land you have chosen? Yes, Mamma, I see it, replies the daughter. Tell me, daughter dear, the mother continues, do you like everything about the future you have been shown? A young maiden might answer this question in a variety of ways. Most often she would say, Yes, Mamma, here will be a splendid paradise garden, a living home. But look and see, this particular temperamental girl, her cheeks flush with a bright glow, comes forth with a non-traditional response. The design is not bad. I really do like it. But still, I should like to add just a little something. Quickly jumping down from the mound, she all at once runs through the crowd to the edge of her future garden, where she stops and says, Here is where an evergreen should grow, with a birch beside it. When a breeze blows from that direction, it will first meet the branches of the pine, then the birch, and after that the breeze will ask the trees of the garden to sing a tune. It will not be repeated exactly in the same way each time, but it will always be delight to the soul. And here, the maiden adds, running off a little to one side, here flowers are to grow. First there will be a flush of red, then over here a little later violet will spring up, and burgundy over there. The maiden, all aglow like a fairy, starts dancing around her future garden, and once more the people remaining in the circle set themselves in motion, hurrying about to carry the seeds in their hands to the spots on the ground the high-spirited girl has pointed out. Upon finishing her dance, she once more runs up to the mound. Here, standing next to her chosen one, she says, Now, the space here will be splendid in its sheen. The earth will produce a most marvelous scene. Tell everyone, my daughter, her mother once more addresses her, who will be crowned to reign over all this marvelous space around? Of all the people living on the earth, upon whom could you bestow the crown? The maiden takes a sweeping look at all the people standing around, holding saplings and seeds in their hands. Each of them stands in a spot indicated by the young man according to his plan and the maiden's outline of the splendid scene to be. But no one is yet planting a seed in the ground. The sacred moment for that has not yet arrived. And at this point the maiden turns to the young man standing beside her on the mound and says, almost in a song, He is worthy to wear the crown, whose thought is able to create a future that will be splendid all around. With these words, the girl touches the shoulder of the young man standing beside her. He gets down on one knee before her. The girl places on his head a most beautiful crown, a garland woven from sweet-smelling grasses by the maiden's own hand. Then, running her fingers 3 times through her fiancé's hair with her right hand, she takes hold of his head with her left and draws it a little closer to herself. Upon her signal, the young man stands up. Then the girl runs down from the mound and bows her head ever so slightly in a sign of meekness. Right at this moment, the young man's father, accompanied by his whole family, is making his way over to the newly crowned groom. Approaching the mound, he stops and pauses in respect. Then the father begins speaking, his gaze fixed on his son. "Who are you whose thought is capable of creating a space of love?" Whereupon the young man replies, "I am your son, and I am the son of the Creator. A crown has been placed upon your head, a sign of a great mission to come. You who are wearing the crown, what will you do as you reign over your domain? I shall create a future that all around most splendid will remain. Where will you gain the strength and inspiration, my son, and the crowned son of the Creator? In love. The energy of love is capable of wandering through the whole universe. How will you manage to see the reflection of the universal love on the earth? There is one girl, Father, and for me she is the reflection of universal love on the earth." With these words, the young man comes down to where the girl is standing, takes her by the hand, and leads her back up to the mound. Holding hands, they watch as the 2 families merge into a single group, sharing hugs and jokes and laughter, from the youngest child to the eldest present. Everything becomes quiet once more when the young man holds up his hand and proclaims, "My thanks to all who heard me in this place. My soul has spoken of the creation of a new space. My thanks to all who have held the energy of love in such high esteem. May what has been conceived by the soul's dream now sprout from the earth." These words have the effect of setting all the people standing around in joyful motion. And with pride and joy and great emotion, the people plant the seeds and saplings in the ground. Each one plants just one sapling in the spot indicated by the young man as set forth in his plan. Those not assigned a specific spot set about to walk around the perimeter of the plot, which has already been marked out, and to the song of the khorovod, throw the seeds they have brought with them into the ground. Within the space of a few minutes, a marvelous garden has been planted, the space which has been created through a dream. And now the people retreat once more beyond the plot's perimeter. Only 2 families remain surrounding the mound, where he and she, the young lovers, are still standing. Drops of rain from the skies are falling onto the ground. The very warm rain is unusual and lasts but a short time. These are tears of joy and tenderness falling from the Creator's eyes to water the marvelous space co-created by his children. What could be dearer for a parent than the marvelous creations of his children? And once again the young man with the crown holds up his hand, and when all is quiet says, "Let all the creatures given to man by the Creator live together with us in friendship." Whereupon the girl and the young man come down from the mound and head over to the shelter where they stayed while working out the design. After these words, out from the circle of people standing around, someone approaches the couple, accompanied by an old dog and a pup. The dog is one that greeted the couple in a friendly way on their tour of the domains, and which they have taken a great liking to. The visitor bows and presents the bride with the puppy. At his signal, the old dog goes and lies down at the young man's feet. This dog has been trained to help man teach all the other animals. The young man orders the dog to sit by the entrance to the shelter, and presently the girl lets the puppy inside. Other people approach the shelter one by one, carrying in their arms a kitten or a lamb, or bringing a colt or a bear cub on a lead. People quickly fashioned tree branches into a wicker fence to attach animal pens to the shelter, and soon the dwelling, which just a short time ago was used by people as sleeping quarters, is now filled with young animals. And there is a tremendous significance in this, for in mixing with each other this way, these animals will forever live together in friendship, caring for and helping each other. No mysticism in this. It is the law of the creator of nature. After all, you can find examples of this even today. If a puppy and a kitten grow up together, they will remain friends as adults. One of the other characteristics of the Vedic period was that people were fully aware of the purpose of the various creatures, and all animals served man. Man did not bother feeding the animals. On the contrary, they fed him. During the Vedic age, both man and his household pets were vegetarians and never ate meat. They would not even think of it. The tremendous variety of plants around were able to supply man's taste abundantly, not only his, but that of the animals surrounding him. In this instance, the bride and groom are presented by the residents of the two villages with the best they have. After accepting the gifts, the young couple once more ascend the mound. Our hearty thanks to everyone, the bridegroom expresses their gratitude to those gathered. Thank you all for co-creating this space. My descendants will care for it over the centuries to come. Our thanks to the mothers who bore the Creator, says the bride. And turning to the young man, she adds, for the joy of the Creator of the sun, the moon, the sprinkle of stars in the sky, and our most beautiful earth, we shall co-create everything you are able to think of. Together with you, my splendid goddess, and with people. The young man answers and adds, you alone are capable of inspiring my dreams. Once again, the young couple come down from the mound. They are immediately surrounded by their respective families, all congratulating them. And people dance the korovod around the plot, accompanied by a joyful song. By this time, it is getting on toward evening. The young people each go back to their own home. For 2 nights and a day they will not see each other. Upon reaching home after having spent so much effort creating, the young creator falls into a deep sleep. His beautiful bride does the same in her own bed. Those who remain at the spot where the co-creation took place in love will go on singing songs in a korovod. Older couples will go off by themselves with resurrected memories of how it all happened to them on a similar day of their own. And over the course of the following night and day, the best craftsmen from both villages will build the couple a little house to the accompaniment of songs and the korovod. They will fit the rows of timbers tight together, the moss and grass between them, making a sweet-smelling bouquet. And by the end of that day, the women in the village will place the best fruits of their harvest in the new home. The 2 mothers will cover the bed with a linen counterpane, and by the second night, every last one of the visitors will be gone from the domain. In the meantime, after a good night's sleep, the young man awoke on his day to see the sun rise over the earth, illuminating his parents' house with its glad rejoicing. His first thought was for the crown he had been given the day before. He took this and put it on his head, smiling at everyone, the picture of bliss. Accompanied by his brother and sisters, he went over to the nearby stream to wash in fresh spring water. Passing through the garden on his way back to the house, Radomir caught sight of his mother. With a restrained smile, the mother began admiring her son, whereupon the young man, bursting with excitement, could no longer restrain himself at the sight of his own mother. He picked her up in his arms with delight. Spinning around like a child, he exclaimed, "How marvelous is life all around, my dear mamma, mamma!" "Oh," his mother exclaimed, breaking into a laugh. Grandfather smiled behind his mustache. Grandmother then approached the happy pair, carrying a beautiful carved wooden ladle, and said, "Young god of ours, stop right there. You must spare your gladsome energies. Drink this tea of calming herbs so that your energy does not burn you. Its time will come the following day." After drinking the tea, the young man began conversing with his grandfather about the universe and the meaning of life. But the tea soon inclined him to sleep, and the young man, whom his grandmother called a young god, had soon nodded off to sleep in the handcrafted counterpane. What was happening? Why did the grandmother call her grandson a god? Was she exaggerating, delighting in her admiration of the young man? Not at all. It was simply the case that her grandson had done deeds worthy of a god's name. God had created the earth and everything living and growing upon it. And with all the knowledge he had assimilated from his forebears, the young man was able to distinguish the purpose from the functions of a multitude of creations. Much to the delight of the Creator, this enabled him to create from them a marvelous living oasis, one capable of bringing joy not only to him and his beloved, but also to the generations of their children, and to people who would over the centuries look upon this splendid domain which was created with love. Could any of the people's deeds on the earth have delighted God more? What better and more significant thing could a man do within the space of one human lifetime on the earth? In the Vedic culture, the wedding rite was no occult ritual. As an aspiration to the likeness of the divine being, it is of tremendous practical significance. In showing his knowledge and aspirations to the people gathered, the young man in love was, in effect, being tested in front of them. His deeds showed that he included the knowledge of all the generations of his family, beginning with its pristine origins, and he added his own contribution too. His creation was appraised as worthy by all the people, and as it was with great joy that they planted trees and herbs in the spots he indicated, and the marvelous co-creation will flourish each spring in ever more beautiful form. Yet for all this, not a single neighbor would feel the slightest envy at the sight of it, since everyone had been involved in co-creating this marvelous space of love. Each one now had their own little shoot they planted in the new splendid domain. When domains like this began to multiply, the whole earth will be clothed in God's own flourishing garden. And in the Vedic culture, everyone knew that man has been given life eternal, and that a splendid life repeats itself when those living now aspire to beauty and perfection. Domains of the Vedic culture, domains that were to be known in subsequent occult books as paradise, as people lost their vast store of knowledge and imagined that this paradise could be perceived only over the distant horizon beyond the clouds, and all to enhance the significance of so-called modern science and covering up the poverty of their own thought. There's no point in debating this without practical proof, but debate settling actions can be quite simple. Let all those worthy, scholarly luminaries now living on earth try, for example, to set up just a single oasis for a single family, a task which, in the Vedic culture, every young man in love had to cope with. A domain which is home to a happy family should be able to satisfy all the food requirements of every body living in it, hour by hour. Disease should not be permitted to have even a foothold. The changing reality of the scene before man should moment by moment gladden his gaze. It should delight the ear with an infinite variety of sounds, and the nostrils with flowering fragrances, and provide ethereal food for the soul, nursing the newborn and preserving love forever. And so, no member of the family should be wasting their energies on mundane concerns. Their thought should remain free. Thought is given to all people for creative purposes. The world of academia takes pride in its illusions. See, our ships are flying into space for the benefit of mankind. For mankind's benefit, you say? See all those bombs going off? They are to protect you. But are they really to protect us? See how this learned doctor has saved your life? But up to that point, life was in the process of being annihilated moment by everyday concerns. They saved the life of a slave to prolong his suffering. The world of academia is in no position to create even the similitude of a splendid domain. Because, again, there is a law of the universe which says, a single creator inspired by love is stronger than all the sciences combined, which are deprived of love. Now, the newlywed man has slept his second night, his deep sleep undisturbed by anything. Only the image of his beloved sparkled and flashed like the stars. In his sleep, this image merged with the space they had created, the might and infinite variety of the universe. Vladimir wakes before dawn, and without a word to anyone, he puts on his garland and picks up a shirt that has been hand-embroidered by his mother. Then he goes to the spring-fed stream. The moon illuminates his path through the pre-dawn darkness, while garlands of stars twinkle in the heavens. After washing in the stream, he puts on his shirt and quickly makes his way to his sacred creation. The heavens begin to brighten. And there he stands alone on the spot where the two villages recently celebrated their joy, the place he created through his dream. The power of the feelings and sensations within a man at such a moment can scarcely be comprehended by anyone who has not experienced them at least once for himself. It can be said that these sensations and feelings are divine in nature, and they increase in quivering anticipation of the first ray of dawn, in which, there she is, his marvelous Lyubomila. Illuminated in the dawn's rays, she runs to greet him and their co-creation. This vision incarnate runs to meet Vladimir. While perfection, of course, knows no real limit, it seems as though time has suddenly stopped for the two of them. Enveloped in the mist of their feelings, they enter their new house. The table is spread with delicacies, and a tempting fragrance of dried flowers wafts from the embroidered counterpane on the bed. "What are you thinking about right now?" she asks him in a heated whisper. "About him, our future child," and Vladimir gives a quiver as he looks at Lyubomila. "My, how beautiful you are." No longer able to contain himself, he very tenderly touches her shoulder and cheek. Both are enveloped in the warm breath of love and carried away to unknown heights. Nobody in a million years will ever be able to describe in detail what happens between him and her when, merging into one in the impulse of mutual love, two people work out the likeness of themselves and God. But the God people of the Vedic culture knew precisely that after the inexplicable miracle takes place, merging two into one, each of them still retains their individuality, and at the same time, for one inexplicable moment, the universe quivers at the sight. The soul of a newborn child runs trippingly barefoot through the stars to the earth, embodying himself, the union of two, plus a third, as one. This act of sanctifying the union of two people in love during the Vedic age can by no means be considered a manifestation of the occult. It was an entirely rational act corresponding to their way of life. The ever-increasing feeling of love for one another in every family coupling bore witness to the level of this culture. In our modern day, this feeling of mutual love in married couples always tends to dissipate after a while. The energy of love is no longer within them, and this is something accepted as a given by human society. But this scenario is unnatural to man. It tells us that the lifestyle people lead today is unnatural. A loving couple in the Vedic culture realize, not with their mind, but with their heart and soul, that the spark of the feeling of love is to call a divine co-creation. Take note of what the couple originally aspired to. Together, in an impulse of inspiration, they mentally worked out their design, the design of a space for their love. It was in this space that they had created that their child was conceived. 3 significant feelings of love merged into one for eternity. After all, a man, for reasons he cannot explain even to himself, retains a strong reverence all his life for his family domain, his motherland, for his child, and for the woman with whom all this was co-created. It is only 3 feelings of love, not a single feeling all by itself, that can live for eternity. The birth of a son or a daughter to a Vedic-age family was also the occasion for a grand celebration and a life-significant rite. And there were many other celebrations back in those days. and there was absolutely no marital infidelity. Millions of happy families made the earth a delightsome place. It is the ranks of historians today, in their efforts to please the powers that be, who say that pristine man was once stupid, that this man killed animals, ate their meat in a frenzy, and dressed himself in their skins. A monstrous lie is necessary to people trying to cover up their monstrous deeds. Raising children in the Vedic culture. Mankind is ever looking for a perfect system of raising children. It endeavors to seek out the wisest teachers and then hands over its children to be raised by them. And you, Vladimir, in preparing to talk with your son, spent 5 years seeking out the best system of child raising. A system capable of explaining everything to you and teaching you how to communicate with your own birth son. And you kept on asking advice from recognized teachers and various scholars. But not one piece of advice, not one system did you find satisfying or indicative of perfection. Doubts came to you with increasing frequency. If there did exist a perfect system of education, many people would surely be using it. And somewhere on the earth there would be a living people that is truly happy. But it seems that in every society all you find is the same or different kinds of problems. You have to search for a happy family. It is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So that means that there is no miraculous system of child raising, and there is no point in searching since there is nothing to search for. Forgive me, please. I had no other choice but to keep track of your thought the whole time. I was trying to determine through you what leads people away from what is so obvious. And then, one day, I felt you thinking. Lack of trust and fear of making a mistake are what make people hand over their children to schools and academies, so that afterward they can blame their teachers, anyone but themselves. On another occasion, I saw how you turned pale and became scared stiff at the thought that children are raised by their parents and society's lifestyle. Your thought was true and accurate, but you were afraid of it, and you kept trying all along to forget about it. But you did not succeed in forgetting what is all too obvious. Then you tried disagreeing with your own thought. You reasoned like this: how is it possible to become a scholar, an artist, or a poet? How can one learn about astronomy or history without studying at a special school? But you were thinking in terms of subject categories of knowledge, and they are not the most important in raising children. Much more important is the culture of feelings, which are capable of compressing all knowledge into a tiny nucleus. You were in a position to understand this, since you yourself are a vivid example of what I have been saying. After all, you were able to write a book without studying in a special school. You and I spent only 3 days together in this glade, and now you are a writer, known in various lands. You can step out in front of a huge audience, including prominent teachers, scholars, poets, and healers, and you can go on speaking to them for as long as 3 hours or more, and people listen to you with rapt attention. You are often asked questions such as, how can you hold an infinite store of information in your memory? How can you recite pages of your books from memory without a copy in front of you? You generally respond to such questions with a mumble, but you concluded within yourself that it must have been working some kind of invisible charms on you. In fact, everything that happened to you is a good deal simpler than that. During those first 3 days you were with me here in the taiga. On all 3 days it was the Vedic school that was exercising an influence on you. And it is certainly not pushy or intrusive, and it does not have any treaties or dogmas. It is capable of transmitting all information through feelings. At times you would get angry or excited and laugh or become fearful, and every time a new feeling arose in you, new information was taken in. That information was truly vast in scope. It is being revealed only later on, when you remember the feelings it aroused in you at the time. Feelings, after all, represent a tremendous amount of concentrated information, and the clearer and stronger the feeling, the more knowledge of the universe it contains. For example, remember that very first night in the taiga when you awoke and saw the she-bear beside you? Right off you were frightened. Please take note and think about those words. Right off, you were frightened. But what is this feeling of fear? Let us try translating it into informational terms. What do we get then? You thought, here beside me is a huge beast of the forest. It weighs considerably more than my body weight. Its paws are far stronger than the muscles of my arms. A beast of the forest can be aggressive. It can attack me and tear my body apart. I am defenseless. I had better jump up and run. To make logical sense of this whole tremendous amount of information requires not just a moment, but a considerably longer time. But this same information, when compressed into a feeling, in this case fear, allows one to react instantaneously to the situation. When one experiences a vivid feeling, a large amount of information passes through man in a flash. It would require a whole scholarly treatise just to describe it, which could take years to work out without the aid of feelings. A correct complex of feelings, sequenced in the right order, can multiply a man's existing store of knowledge by 1,000-fold. For example, your fear of the bear passed as instantaneously as it arose. But what made it go away? After all, it was not natural for it to go away. You were still in the taiga as before, still defenseless, and the bear was not far away. Besides, there might be a multitude of other beasts out there in the forest. But that sense of fear in you was instantaneously replaced by a feeling of security. You felt this sense of protection, even more strongly than when you were on your boat or in the city surrounded by armed guards. This feeling of protection came over you just as instantaneously. It came over you just as soon as you saw that the bear took pleasure in carrying out my orders, reacting to my words and gestures. The feeling of protection enabled you to perceive information in a whole new way. A detailed description of everything that happened to you could fill a great many pages of scientific treatise. And in your books you have devoted quite a few pages to the animal's relationship to man. But the theme is infinite in scope. In terms of feelings, however, it can be expressed in the twinkling of an eye. But something still more significant took place. Within the space of just a few seconds, two of opposite feelings turned out to be in perfect balance. I became to you someone in whose presence you could feel completely protected, even though at the same time one you could not fully explain, and even found a little frightening. The balance of feelings is very important. It is a confirmation of man's equilibrium, yet at the same time, as though constantly pulsating, feelings engender more and more streams of information. The culture and way of life each family in the Vedic civilization, as well as the way of life of the whole human society of the time, constituted a most remarkable school for the raising of the next generation, an intense regime of self-perfection for man, advancing him into the act of creation in worlds of the unfathomable universe. In the Vedic age, children were not raised by the way they are in our schools today, but through participation in merry festivals and rites. These were either celebrations within a single family, or ones where the whole community took part, or several neighboring communities together. More specifically, the multitude of celebrations during the Vedic age were crucial tests for both children and adults, and a means of information exchange. The way of life in the family and the preparation for these celebrations afforded the opportunity to acquire tremendous systematic storage of knowledge. Children were taught without the compulsion they feel when they are made to sit and listen to a teacher against their will. The learning process unfolded moment by moment for both parents and their children cheerfully and not obtrusively. It was something desirable and fascinating, but it did include some methods that would be considered unusual today. Ignorant of their tremendous significance for man's education, modern scholars might call parents' actions during Vedic times superstitious or even occult-like. For example, you thought that way and were very concerned when you saw our son, still so very young and helpless, as yet unable to stand on his own 2 feet, being picked up by the mighty eagle. The eagle held the little boy in its claws and circled over the glade, rising and descending by turns. That happened with the children in all Vedic families, though they did not always employ eagles for this purpose. They might be able to show the earth from on high, from the top of a mountain, if there happened to be a mountain close to where they lived. Occasionally, a father might take his infant son or daughter and climb to the top of a tall tree. Sometimes they would build a special tower for this purpose, and yet the effect was more dramatic when an eagle circled over the ground with an infant in its claws. In just a moment or so, the child would experience a whole gamut of feelings, and in that very moment he would take in the whole multitude of information. And when he was older, he could discover this information within him through these feelings whenever he wanted, whenever the need arose. Remember, for example, I showed you what a perfect design the handsome Vladimir created together with his bride Lyubomilia for their domain. I told you that the most recognized scientists in the world today are unable to create anything like that. They would not be able to do it even if they all joined together as one. But how could the young man bring such a miracle back then? Where did he acquire the knowledge of all the plants, the significance of the winds and the functions of the planets, and so much else besides? After all, he never sat at a traditional school desk. He did not study science. Then how did the young man learn the purpose of each and every one of the 530,000 species of flora? He might make use of only 9,000 of them, but he could accurately tell the interrelationship each species had with the others. Naturally, Vladimir had been observing his father's and their neighbors' domains right from childhood. Yet he never wrote anything down and did not consciously memorize anything. He never asked his parents what grew for what purpose, and they would never vex him by preaching at him. And yet this young man in love still managed to create his own domain, and even a better one than his parents had. Please do not be surprised, Vladimir. Try to understand. You see, Vladimir did not set forth a logical plan for his garden, although indeed it turned out that way in his domain. What happened was that Vladimir outlined through his feelings a splendid picture for his loved one and his future offspring, and in his flight with the eagle over his family domain contributed to his impulse of love, to his inspiration. During the time the infant Vladimir looked down from the height of the eagle's flight on the landscape of the domain, a picture was being imprinted on his subconscious just as on a reel of a movie film. He was still not able to appreciate the beauty of the scene with his mind, but his feelings were able to scan all the information from the variegated countryside below into a permanent imprint. And though his feelings, not through his mind or intellect, he was able to perceive what he saw as beautiful. And not only that, but there, amidst the beautiful landscape seen from the sky, stood his very own mamma, smiling at him. What can be more marvelous for a little one than his mother's smile? And his mother was waving to him. Yes, that was her, the one whose breast contained warm, life-giving milk. For a suckling child, nothing could be more marvelous than that. And from the height of the eagle's flight, everything the young Vladimir beheld seemed to him to be a single whole, inseparable from his mamma. In the twinkling of an eye, the knowledge of this part of creation entered into him with a flash of exhilaration. Young people displayed great competence in such modern sciences as zoology, agronomy, and astronomy. People also appreciated their artistic taste. Of course, there were also professional teachers in the Vedic age. During the winter, elderly people who were especially learned in various disciplines would come to the community. Each settlement had a common meeting hall where they could set forth their wisdom. And if one of the children listening to them suddenly showed a special interest in astronomy, for example, the teacher would go and talk to the child's parents in their home. The teacher would always be warmly welcomed in the home. This scholar would talk about the stars with the child as many hours and days as the youngster wished, and there was no definitive answer to the questions as to who learned more from whom during these discussions. After all, it was with considerable respect that the great elderly scholar asked questions of the child. He could argue with him without being preachy. In the Vedic age, there was no need to record the discussion, or the conclusions or discoveries arising therefrom. Free from daily routine and the multitude of concerns that occupy us today, the human memory could take in a great deal more information than the best computers that have been invented in our times. Besides, any discoveries made, provided they were rational, were at once shared with everyone to use and to put into practice. The parents and other members of the household might also listen to these scholarly discussions, and sometimes even contribute to them, albeit tactfully. But still, it was the child who was inevitably the center of attention. When a budding astronomer came to what the adults judged to be a wrong conclusion, they might say something like, "Excuse me, I can't understand you." The child would try to explain, and it often happened that the child would prove himself right. As spring approached each year, all the residents of the settlements would gather in the common meeting hall and take note of their children's most recent achievements. Reports were given during these days. A 6-year-old lad, for example, might astound everyone, telling about the meaning of life like a philosopher. Children might show everyone the marvelous things they had made. Others might delight the gathering with a song or an unusual dance. You could call these acts a kind of test or simply a time of fun for all. The label was unimportant. What was important was that everybody derived joy from the act of creating. The stream of positive emotions and revelations during this event were joyfully put into practice. To the questions as to who remained the most important figure in the raising of children, one could confidently answer that it was the culture and the way of life lived by the families in the Vedic age. What lessons can be drawn from that culture for children of our present day, which our current systems of child raising is the best, we can say? Which of our current systems of child raising is the best, can we say? Judge for yourself, none of them is perfect. Mind you, when we distort the history of mankind, we cause children to lie to themselves, and we force their thinking into a completely false way. And that is why we suffer and cause our children to suffer too. Above all, everybody ought to know the truth about themselves. Without truth, life bogged down in false dogmas is like a hypnotic sleep. The sequence of 3 pictures in children's textbooks needs to be rearranged. The history of people living on the earth needs to be presented to children correctly for a change. First of all, one must verify in one's own heart the accuracy of what has been reported. And then, once children have learned the essence of the history undistorted, a new path must be selected in consultation with them. Children's books about the history and development of the earth and its people tend to feature 3 pictures that are far from harmless. Consider what these pictures impress upon them from a very young age. The first picture shows an impression of a primitive man. Take a look at how he is portrayed. He stands there, all covered with thick hair, with a beastly grin and a dumb expression on his face, holding a wooden club and surrounded by the bones of the creatures he has killed. The second picture features man, clothed in armor, carrying a sword, a dazzling decorated helmet on his head. He is off to conquer cities with troops under his command, while a crowd of slaves bows low before his hand. In the third picture, man is shown with a noble face and an intelligent expression. He is healthy-looking and dressed in a suit, and surrounded by a multitude of appliances, contrivances, and mechanical gadgets to boot. Happy and delightful, it is the overall impression of modern man. All 3 pictures are false, as is the sequence in which they are arranged. This whole lie is stubbornly rigid and deliberately drilled into our children. Later, I shall be able to tell you who is responsible and why they find this lie so indispensable. But first, I want you to try to verify the accuracy of these 3 pictures using your own sense of logic. Judge for yourself. The trees, bushes, and grass you can still see today in their primitive form. Even though they are billions of years old, you can still look at them and delight in their perfection. What does all this tell us? The works of the Creator were made perfect right from the very beginning. And so, did he make man the favorite of all of his creations to be some kind of monstrosity? Of course not. Right from the beginning, man, the most perfect work of the Creator, was the most glorious creation on the earth. The first picture ought to show history as it actually was. It ought to show a family of happy people with a look on their faces expressing both intelligent and childlike purity, and love on the faces of both parents. Human bodies in harmony with their surroundings, striking in their beauty and graceful power of spirit. A flourishing garden all around, creatures always on the alert to render service with gratitude. The second picture, too, should present to children an image of a historical fact. Two armies in monstrous armor rushing at each other, their commanders standing on a height of land, being entreated by priests. Some of their faces show fear and disorientation, while those of others, after yielding to the priests' entreaties, are inflamed with a beastly fanaticism. In just a moment, a senseless slaughter will begin. People will start killing their own kind. The third picture shows people in today's world. We should see a group of people of pale and sickly countenance in a room filled with an array of artificial things. Some have extremely obese figures. Others are bent over. Faces are full of heaviness and gloom. The kinds of faces you see on most passers-by along big city sidewalks. Through the window, one can see cars exploding on the street and dirty ashes raining down from the sky. All three of these true pictures of history should be shown to the children, and the question asked, which of these lifestyles would you like to live? The pictures are only arbitrary illustrations. Of course, the child should also be told the true account, sincerely and skillfully presented. The child should know the whole history of the human race without misleading distortions. Only after that can his actual education begin. The question should be asked, how can we change the situation today? And the child will come up with an answer. Not right off, not in the twinkling of an eye, but he will find it. Another thought will take over, a creative thought. Oh, the raising of children. You see, Vladimir, just a single sincerely asked question, together with the parents' desire to hear their child's answer, is capable of uniting parents with their children, of making them happy forever. This joint quest for happiness is infinite, but even the beginning of the quest can be called a state of happiness. Everybody today should learn their true history. Rituals. At a later period, the occult priests undertook tremendous efforts to distort and besmirch the significance of the ritual acts of the Vedic times. They started a rumor, for example, that the Vedic people mindlessly worshipped elements of water, and that they held a yearly sacrifice of young girls who had not yet known love, throwing them into a lake or a river, or that, tying them to a raft, they pushed them off from the shore and dispatched them to their doom. The element of water, a lake or a river, was indeed connected with many acts among the Vedic people, but it had a completely different significance, in support of life, not death. Let me tell you about just one of these. It is still practiced today in a superficial form, but the resemblance is only superficial. In today's variant, its great, rational, and poetic significance has been replaced by an obscurity and occultism. In various countries today, there is a celebration involving water, whereby wreaths or small rafts with beautiful lanterns or candles are set afloat on a water surface and pushed away from the shore in a plea to the water to grant good fortune. But let us see where this particular celebration originated, and how rational and poetic a significance it had in its pristine form. In Vedic times, it sometimes happened that one or two girls, how many is of no importance, did not find someone they could love within their own community. And even at large festivals involving several communities, they did not succeed in choosing their intended. This would not have been on account of limited selection. Indeed, they were presented with a whole array of splendid young men with intelligent countenances, almost like gods, who shone in their celebratory performances. But while the heart and soul of the girl in question were filled with great expectations, they were not visited by love. The girl was dreaming of someone, but of whom? She herself did not know. Even today, no one can explain the mystery or freedom of choice inherent in the energy of love. This is why, on a designated day, the girls would go down to the river and in one of the little bays set a small raft afloat. Its edges were decorated with a garland of flowers. In the middle stood a small jug of wine or fruit infusion. Pieces of fruit were placed around the jug. The drink was to be prepared by the girl herself, and the fruit to be plucked from the trees she had planted by her own hand in her family garden. She might also place on the raft a woven linen headband, or some other objects, but it had to be something made with her own hands. Lastly, she would place on the raft a little lampadka. Around the fire burning on the shore, the girls danced their khorovod and sang about a beloved, of whom they were not yet fully aware. Then, taking one of the branches burning on the fire, they lit the wick of the lampadka. They pushed their rafts out of the bay into the main stream of the river, where the currents would catch it tenderly, convey it down the river's farthest and unknown reaches. And each girl followed her raft with a hopeful gaze as it receded into the distance, until only one little light of the lampadka was still visible. But the girls' hearts were aflame with the fire of hope. A feeling of joy and tenderness grew within, directed to one whom they were yet to know. Hastening back to their homes, the girls retreated to their rooms and excitedly began preparing for the anticipated meeting. He, the desired one, might come with the dawn or at sunset time. The hour did not matter. But how did it happen? What would draw him to her? Was the meeting the result of mysticism or rationality, or perhaps the knowledge to which the Vedic people had access through their feelings? Decide for yourself which way. After all, the girls' rafts were carried along by the current on specific days. All the communities, even the distant ones, were aware of these particular days. Their journeys might last a day or 2 or 3. On all these days and moonlit nights, young men who had not yet known love were waiting hopefully in their loneliness all along the river's bays. Upon seeing the little lights in the distance being carried along by the current, a young man would at once leap into the water and swim toward the little lights of love he had seen. The current did not inflame the young man's heated body, but tenderly cradled it with the transparent water of the stream. Closer and closer came the little lights, and now the young man could make out the outline of the rafts, each one prettier than the next, it seemed. He chose one of them. It was not clear why this particular one fell under his special esteem. He drew the raft from the middle of the stream to the shore, either pushing it with his hands or nudging it along by pressing his cheek to its side. It seemed as though the river current was engaging him to play, but his body was constantly being arrayed with strength, more and more, and he scarcely noticed the river's play. Besides, his thoughts was already on the shore. Placing the little raft carefully on the land, the young man snuffed out the lampadka, took an excited drink from the jug, and quickly headed home to prepare for his journey. He took with him whatever he had found on the little craft. Along the way he took a taste of the fruit and was thrilled by its taste. By and by he arrived at the village from where the raft had been launched, and was able to accurately determine which garden and which tree whose fruit had sweetened his journey. Aha, some might wonder, one cannot escape mysticism entirely. How on earth could young men of that time find their future loved ones with such accuracy? One could say that it was love leading them by a path known solely to love, but I can simplify the explanation. The lampadka also played a role. Notches had been cut in the small vessel carrying the brightly burning wick floating in the oil, so that everyone could tell how long the lampadka had been alight. The speed of the river's current was also widely known. It was a very simple calculation, and quickly executed. For a young man of the Vedic age, it was no task at all to find the village the village the particular tree from which the fruit he had eaten had been plucked. Pieces of fruit resemble each other only superficially. The fruit of the tree and the plants of the same species, even two trees growing side by side, can show marked differences in shape, color, fragrance, and taste. There is only one thing that cannot be explained with complete accuracy. How was it that he and she always fell in love with each other upon meeting for the first time? And their love was extraordinarily passionate. It is all quite simple, a philosopher of the present day might say. Their feelings for each other were already being set afire by their own dream even before they met. But back then, a wizened, wise man would have responded to such a question with a wink. Our river has always had a mischievous streak in her. Of course, if he wanted to, the wise man could go into detail of each moment of the ritual I have told you about and explain the purpose of each one of those moments. He could write a great treatise on it, but no wise man would bother wasting his thought on such a venture. The whole point is, Vladimir, that they did not analyze life, they created it. Feeding life in the flesh. People living in the Vedic age did not know a single disease of the flesh. Even at the age of 150 or even 200 years, they maintained a lively spirit, a joy of living, and remained completely healthy. They had no doctors or healers such as exist in great numbers today. Diseases of the flesh were impossible because of the way of life in one's domain. The natural space of love which they themselves had established completely regulated their intake of food. Man's body was supplied with everything it needed in the required quantity and at the time most favorable for its consumption, and at the most favorable planetary alignment for the intake of food. Take note, Vladimir, in nature there is no arbitrary phenomenon that during the whole spring, summer, and autumn seasons in the various plants mature and bring forth their fruit in a particular sequence. First come the blades of grass, the dandelions, for example. They are also pleasing to the taste, especially when mixed with winter fare. Then we see early currants maturing, wild strawberries and raspberries, both earlier in the full sun and later in the shade. Sweet cherries, later sour cherries, and a great many other fruits, herbs, and berries, all of which, at the appropriate moment of their choosing, attempt to attract human attention by their unusual shape, color, and fragrance. There was no science of nutrition back then. What and how much one should eat and at what time, that was not something anyone even thought about. And still man consumed everything needful for his body with an accuracy down to the last gram. Each berry, little herb, and piece of fruit has its own day, hour, and minute when it is the most beneficial to the human body, when it will complete the process of its own growth in conjunction with the celestial bodies. By this time, it will have taken account of the specifics of what lies under the ground, and of other plants growing around it, as well as the man that has bestowed his gaze upon it, and then evaluate and determine what his greatest needs are. And on that very day, when it is ready to serve man, man will honor it by his acceptance and allow perfection itself to become his food. I have said that a woman with child should spend all 9 months of her pregnancy in her own garden, in the space she has created together with the one she loves. This is no occult mystery. It manifests the great rationality of the divine being. Judge for yourself. In nature, there are many plants that can even painlessly terminate a woman's pregnancy. Garlic, for example, oregano, the male fern, birthwort, and many others. On the other hand, there are plants capable of helping the fetus develop harmoniously in the mother's womb. Which one should be taken and in what quantity is not something anybody will ever be able to tell. He is the only one who knows, the one inside the mother's womb. And he is taking care of not only himself but his mother too. That is why it often happens that after having a child, a mother becomes healthier, younger looking. In order for this to occur, the pregnant mother must definitely be in her own garden, where every blade of grass is acquainted with her and every piece of fruit grows exclusively for her. She has also come to know each one's taste and fragrance. Her desires are quite natural and are in the best position to determine what kind of food she needs to take in and in what quantity. Such accuracy is not possible in someone else's domain or garden, even if the vegetation in that garden is many times richer and more diverse. Besides, another factor making the ideal food intake impossible in another garden is that before consuming a particular berry or piece of fruit, the woman will try it first. Take an apple, for example. If she wishes to eat it, she plucks it from the tree and takes a bite. After swallowing the bite, she at once feels that here is something her body does not need, and has thereby caused harm to herself and to her child. Why does this happen? The fact is that even outwardly, similar pieces of fruit can be made up of different substances. In her own garden, having tasted fruit from the various trees on a number of occasions, she could not make such a mistake. In another garden, mistakes are inevitable. What kind of law or knowledge provided such fine-tuned assistance in feeding man at that time? It was the absence of laws and treaties. Man could depend only upon the divine. Today they say that man is in unity with, is at one with nature. But what is this unity right now? Have you ever thought about it? In today's day and age, man consumes mainly artificial food, only what the system offers him as convenient to itself, and the schedule of consumption of food is also artificially determined by this artificial system. Back then, in the Vedic age, everything was determined for man by his God-given feelings, and the slightest sensation of hunger was satisfied by the space of love back then. After all, man's feelings in harmony with his space of love could determine down to the minute, as accurately as the most perfect mechanical device ever invented or the smartest instructions ever penned, what food man should take in and when. Whenever man walked through the space of his own co-creation, his free thought could create or work out plans on the scale of the universe. Temptingly beautiful fruits surrounded him. Intuitively, he would pluck and eat a sample, or two or three, without having his thought distracted by these sweet delicacies supplied him by God. Back then, man did not think about food. He fed himself in much the same manner as we breathe today. The space he had created, in conjunction with his intuition, accurately worked out how and when the flesh should be fed. In the winter time, the whole multitude of plants freed itself from its fruit and foliage in preparation for rest. Winter was for the creation of the spring to come. But even in winter, man did not waste his time thinking of food, even though he did not prepare any comestibles in advance. All this was done for him by household creatures with great effort and love. Squirrels amassed a whole collection of nuts and mushrooms. Bees collected honey and flower pollen. Every autumn the bear would dig root crop storage cellars. Upon awakening in the spring, the bear would come to the man's dwelling and either give a low roar or knock lightly on his paw upon the door. The bear would summon the man, who would in turn show him which of the cellars should be dug up. Perhaps the bear had forgotten where he had stored the food away. Perhaps he was longing for communication with man. Any member of the family might come out to him in response, but most of the time it was the child. After giving the hard-working beast a pat on the muzzle, he would go to the place designated by a marker and stamp his foot on the ground. The bear then began scraping the earth away in the spot and opened up the stores. Upon seeing his accomplishment, he would jump all around for joy before delivering the stored food up to the surface with his paw. But he would not be the first to partake of the food. He would wait until man began carting off at least some of the goods to the house. Man himself could also prepare provisions, but this was not so much work as an art form. Many families would produce their own wine and infusions from different kinds of berries. Such wine was not strong and intoxicating like vodka. The result was a most healthful drink. Useful food provided to man by animals included milk. Not only from just any animal, man selected only those that were considered kind, tender, and keen of mind, those who demonstrated an eagerness to offer man what they produced. Let us say one of the children or the elders of a household went up to a goat or a cow and touched its udder, and the animal suddenly began moving away. Man would not attempt to drink the milk of any animal that did not want to share it with him. This did not mean that the animal did not love the man. It often happened that animals subconsciously determined that at that moment the composition of their lactic mixture would not be useful to the man. People of the Vedic civilization would feed themselves from the various kinds of food growing only on their plot or produced by their household animals. This approach was not determined by any kind of superstitious law. Rather, it was the result of a vast store of knowledge. Though there is a difference between knowing, znat, and being fully aware of, vedat, something. Being fully aware of is not just to know. It is to feel with one's whole being, body, and soul, a multitude of phenomena, the purpose of each divine creation, as well as his system. And every man of the Vedic culture was fully aware that what he consumed as food not only fed the body, but filled the soul with conscious awareness. At the same time, it conveyed information directly to him from all the worlds of the universe. This is why these people were many times superior to their modern-day counterparts in terms of inner energy, keenness of mind, and quickness of thought. The animals and plants living in man's family space reacted to man as to a god. The animals, herbs, and trees were consistently thirsting for a tender look or a kind touch on man's part. And this power of the energy of feelings was what prevented unwanted weeds from growing in the garden or vegetable plot. Many people are now aware how a household plant can suddenly shrivel up when it meets with disfavor on the part of someone in the family. On the other hand, a feeling of love and communication directed toward the same plant can cause it to flourish. This is why the Vedic people never went near their garden with a hoe. Even today we have an expression such as, give someone the evil eye. It originated in those times. People could create a lot through their energy of feelings. Suppose a man is walking through his domain. Everything around catches his kindly gaze. He might look at a weed and think, why are you here? The weed would quickly wither from sorrow. On the other hand, if one were to smile at a cherry tree, it would cause its sap to run through its veins with twice the energy as before. And if someone among the Vedic people happened to set out on a long journey, that man would not bother to take along a supply of food. He would be able to find more than enough along the way to feed himself. Whenever he came to a settlement, he would see the splendid domains and ask for food and drink. It was considered an honor to serve tasty fruit, vegetables, and drink to a traveler. Life without violence and crime. Among the people of the Vedic civilization, over the thousands of years of its existence, there was not a single act of violence or theft, or a mere fight. Even insulting words were absent from people's vocabulary, yet at the same time there were no laws to punish such behavior. Laws can never protect one from evil deeds, but the knowledge and culture of the Vedic peoples completely ruled out conflicts in interpersonal relationships. Judge for yourself, Vladimir. You see, every family living in their domain was aware that should any kind of unpleasantness happen to anyone, even a stranger, on the territory of their own domain or nearby, even on the very edge of the settlement, the whole space would then suffer. The universal energy of aggression would have an effect on every growing thing and on everyone living in that space. It would upset the balance of energies. The energy of aggression might grow and leave its impression on adults and children alike, and infect their offspring with illness. By contrast, if a traveling passenger leaves a feeling of joy behind, the space will radiate even greater beauty. Not only that, but a man visiting another settlement would be physically incapable of eating food plucked from a tree without the owner's permission or picked up from the ground in a garden upon which he had intruded. People of the Vedic culture had a highly refined sensitivity. their physiological makeup would immediately notice a significant distinction in the taste of pilfered food from that served by someone's generous hand. The whole range of foodstuffs sold in our modern supermarkets has nowhere near the fragrance and taste of the pristine produce of the Vedic age, completely indifferent to man. It has no feeling or soul. It does not belong to anyone, and is beholden to no one. It is simply merchandise for sale. If modern man could actually taste and compare the food known in Vedic times, he could never eat the produce of today. A newcomer could not, would not even think to take what was owned by someone else without asking. Every single object, even a stone, contains information within itself known only to the family living in that particular domain. In the Vedic civilization, every domain was a fortress that loomed impenetrable to evil in whatever form. At the same time, it served as a mother's womb for the family dwelling therein. Nobody back then built high walls for fortification. The territory of each domain was protected by a living green hedge, a hedge which, along with everything living within its boundaries, protected the family from a whole host of harmful influences on the human body and soul. I already mentioned to you that the bodies of deceased family members were buried only in the garden or among the trees of their own domain. Those people were fully aware that while the human soul is eternal, the material body, too, cannot disappear without a trace. All objects, even those which appear to be soulless, carry within themselves a great deal of information from the universe. In the divine nature, nothing ever disappears into oblivion. It only changes its state and its fleshy form. The bodies of the deceased were not covered with headstones, and even the places of their burial were not marked in any way. The space created by their hands and souls served as a great monument to them. And, changing their state, the now soulless bodies gave rise to trees, herbs, and flowers. New children were born and walked among them. Oh, how everything around just loved the children. The spirit of their ancestors lingered over the space, loving and protecting the children. Children treated the space of their motherland with love. Their thought created no illusion about life being finite. On the contrary, the life of the Vedic people was infinite. The soaring soul passes through all the dimensions of the universe, and after visiting a number of different planes of being, it is once again embodied in conventional human form. Upon waking in the garden of his motherland, the child will once again give a bright smile. The whole space responds to his smile, and the bright and the little rays of light, the breeze rustling the leaves in the trees, the flowers and the stars in the distant sky will sigh. We are at one, embodied by you, child of divine being. Even today, people cannot figure out why elderly people living on foreign strands ask to be buried in their motherland. Such people intuitively suspect that only their motherland can bring them back to the earth in a paradise garden, while a foreign strand rejects their souls. To have their bodies buried in the motherland has been aspiration of people's souls for millennia. But can a cemetery be called a piece of the motherland in any nation? Cemeteries are a markedly recent phenomenon, designed to tear human souls apart in hellfire, demean and subjugate them, make them into lowly slaves. Cemeteries are like, they are like cesspits where people go to get rid of their useless junk. The souls of the dead are tormented over cemeteries, while the living are terrified of cemetery plots. Picture to yourself, by contrast, a kin's domain of Vedic times. Bodies of many generations are buried there. Every little herb aspires to tenderly care for those living therein, to be useful to man's life in the flesh. But every herb and every fruit in the garden can suddenly become poisonous when faced with aggression on the part of a newcomer. That is why nobody even thought of taking anything without asking. The domains could not be seized by force. They could not be bought for any amount of money. Of course, who would dare trespass upon a place that is capable of destroying the trespasser? And each individual here endeavored to create their own marvelous oasis. The whole planet grew more beautiful with each passing year. When modern man surveys a city from on high today, what does he see, pray tell? the whole ground covered with an accumulation of artificially erected stones, dwellings spread in all directions, upward and outward. Here, there, and everywhere lies miles and miles of vast expanses blanketed by stone landscapes. There is no clean water anywhere, and the air is polluted. How many happy families can dwell under their own piles of stone? If one compares modern families with those of the Vedic culture, the answer is not a single one. And one could go further. Amidst these piles of artificial stone, people do not dwell, they sleep. And yet, in this hypnotic sleep, a single living cell still strays like a tiny nucleus through the body. Sometimes at rest, sometimes in motion, this living cell touches teeming multitudes of others, attempting to awaken those that are asleep. Its name is dream, and it will awaken them. Then human families will once again create marvelous oases upon the earth. As it was before, so it will be again. And in looking down on the earth from on high, man's gaze will once again be much charmed by a multitude of living scenes. And each one of these marvelous scenes will mean that earth has been touched in that spot by the hand of an awakened Vedrus. And once again, a happy family of people will be dwelling in their own plot of the motherland. People who have learnt to know God and the meaning and purpose of life. The Vedic people knew why the stars are in the sky. Their numbers included a great many poets and artists. There was never any rivalry among the communities. There was no cause for crime or violence, and there was a complete absence of hierarchical structures. The Vedrus culture flourished on the territories of our modern nations of Europe, India, Egypt, and China, and there were no lines of demarcation dividing the various areas of land. There were no rulers, either important or petty. The sequence of grand celebrations provided a natural order of things. People of the Vedic age possessed a knowledge of creation far in advance of modern man. Their inner energy allowed them to enhance the growth of some plants and arrest that of others. Household animals endeavored to carry out man's commands, not to obtain food which they already had in abundance, but to receive from man a reward in the rays of the energy of grace emanating from him. Even today, a word or gesture of praise from a man is pleasant to everyone, to people, animals, and all growing things. But in earlier times, people's energy was immeasurably greater. All living things were drawn to it as to the sun.